As we get started, I'm Joe Fay, along with Bill, I'm the Facets Executive Director and VIC co-facilitator. As we always open, let's open with a prayer, and I've asked Cameron to lead us in the blessing. Cameron.
Yes, let's open together. And Congressman Beyer, thank you for your time with us today. Let us pray. One in whom we call good and love, we gather together today, coming from different faith perspectives and backgrounds, and yet what unites us together is our desire for the common good of all humanity and the healing of all creation. May this time with Congressman Beyer be holy unto you, so that we might learn that people and profit need not be at odds when we demand systems that work for the good of all. May justice always be at the forefront, and hospitality to the marginalized and the stranger drive us in our daily passions to serve you and to serve others. Bless Congressman Beyer in his work and on those committees in which he leads and participates in. May they work for the good of all. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Cameron.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron.
So we're very lucky today to have Congressman Don Beyer joining us today to talk about legislative priorities, interaction between you as a congressman and the state and county officials. It seems like we can't talk this year without talking about pandemic response, but then also the economic issues, infrastructure, and social issues that are so important to our region, especially the Route 1 corridor, to the 8th Congressional District, where you've been our congressman since 2015, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so, as I said briefly, Congressman Beyer has to leave us at 12:30. So we'll do any other announcements after this session, and other updates after the time we have with the congressman. So I'll turn it over to you, Don. Thank you.
Joe, thank you very much. And thank you guys very much for the invitation to be with you. I was excited to see this scheduled, and I hope we have a good hour-long conversation about the things that you'd like to talk about. But thanks for all that you do in the community and in the faith community. I feel so incredibly lucky, blessed to live in Northern Virginia, where our tangible social capital has got to be among the largest in the world. You go to, for example, in Arlington, if you go to an OAR breakfast back pre-COVID, which is offender aid and restoration for folks getting out of prison, you'll have 1,000 people. If you do it, most states you wouldn't get 1,000 people, much less one jurisdiction. It's just really, really remarkable. So I'm really pleased. Let me give you the quick overview, and then talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. First of all, I love my job. This is the most fulfilling job I've ever had. It gets more fulfilling every year. I've been in a lot of different, leadership positions and stuff, but there's none that have had the change agent capabilities that this does. So I feel just really, really blessed. And you accumulate power over time, but it's just the power of relationships. Where Nancy Pelosi actually knows who you are, and you get along, you have personal relationships with the chairs of the committee and the like, and that helps. So right now I'm chairman of the Joint Economic Committee, which is the equivalent to the Council of Economic Advisors, but for Congress. It's bipartisan, bicameral. I actually have Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton on the committee with me. But for the next 2 years, I'll chair that. And our focus is going to be on income and wealth inequality, which is the worst it's been in 100 years. And not just studying it, but trying to come up with concrete legislative plans to do this. Our May hearing is going to be on income and wealth inequality and race, because the typical Black family has 1/8 the net worth of a white family for many reasons, everything from the housing discrimination through most of the 20th century to legacies of slavery to on and on and on. Just the systemic racism. And then in June, it'll be income wealth inequality and gender. Because once again, you see that women continue to lag way behind men in that respect. I also accidentally, unintentionally got elected chairman of the Space Subcommittee on Science, Space, and Technology. I don't know how that ended up, but I'm thrilled because I'm getting to do the deep dive on lots and lots of space stuff, which I could talk about for the entire hour, but won't unless you bring me back to it. But the number one thing will be reauthorizing the NASA budget. So the House has been an incredibly productive start. In March, we reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act. We passed bipartisan gun violence legislation on background checks for everything. Internet sales, garage sales, private sales in your backyard. And we closed the Charleston loophole, which was what Dylan Roof used to kill all the folks at Emmanuel Baptist, or Emmanuel AME. Where if they don't come back in 24 hours or 48 hours, you're automatically entitled to buy a gun. We passed H.R. 6, which gave pathways to citizenship for Dreamers, which is incredibly relevant for Northern Virginia. And H.R. 1, which is the For the People Act, the biggest single thing to overcome things like Citizens United and all the 350 some voter repression state laws that are in play right now across the country. And then we passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which includes many good things, including banning chokeholds and banning no-knock entries, and a bill that Congressman Jennifer Eleanor Holmes Norton and I have been sponsored for a number of years on requiring body cameras on all federal police officers. This is something that we didn't have in the tragic case of Bijan Gaysar, who was shot to death on the GW Parkway a couple of years ago, and certainly didn't have during the clashes when the president walked with his Bible over to St. John's. No body cameras once again, so it was difficult to tell what was happening. But then let me move to the American Rescue Plan, which that day I voted on, and I pointed out that I thought it was the most consequential bill I'd ever voted on. And everyone I talked to said the same thing, that it just $1.9 trillion did so many things. Although of the many, and I'll detail them very quickly, but the one I'm proudest of, which I think you will all appreciate, is of the children living in poverty in America, literally half will be raised out of poverty just by this one bill. And that's specifically with the child tax credit, which will be $3,600 per child per year and refundable. So you don't have to have the tax credit. And although we wrote it in the House to be a check every month, literally a $300 check every month for every child, the Senate pushed back and just made it periodic. So it may be once a quarter or once every 2 months, but nevertheless, you don't have to wait till April the following year to get this tax credit. It will really help to put groceries on the table and clothes on the kids. But then there was the $1,400 economic impact payment. That was like 82% of the adults in our state and 81% of the children in our state will be recipients of families that get that $1,400 per adult. There were people that pushed back and said there are going to be people that get it that don't need it, which is like, yeah, but there'll be an awful lot of people who desperately need it who are going to get it, and it's too hard to tell the difference. And by the way, the people that may not need it right now are not the ones at the top of the income scale or the top of the wealth scale. These are people who have been left behind in so many other ways that it's just a drop in the bucket. If we can give $2 trillion to the top 1% through the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, we can certainly afford to do this for all the people that are clearly middle class or lower middle class. There was $2.2 billion in relief for K through 12, 50% increase in the earned income tax credit, which is like a big deal. 419,000 childless Virginia workers didn't qualify for the EITC before and now will. And then the pandemic unemployment insurance is a startling number I saw the other day that 46% of the unemployed in America have been unemployed for more than 6 months. So they become long-term unemployed, which is really a dilemma. We've come back a lot, but we're still 4 million jobs short of where we were before the pandemic. And we still have 5.5% decrease in labor force participation among both men and women. And then there's lots of money for vaccinations. You've probably seen that. I think the previous president did and his administration did a good job getting the vaccines faster than ever before in American world history. And then this president did a terrific job expanding the number. So as you saw, Governor Northam said by April, or maybe, but both Northam and Biden have said April 18th, April 19th, every adult in America is eligible to get a vaccine. And if you live in Arlington, Alexandria, Falls Church, you can register right now. Fairfax has a different registration system, and that won't be available till April 18th. But I encourage you, if you haven't gotten, to sign up right away. And lots and lots of good stuff. I get an update call once a week with Jeff Zients, who's the vaccinations czar for Joe Biden. And they've just done amazing work. And my push right now with a bunch of members is making sure that we remember, even if there's 1 billion people vaccinated by the end of the year, that's 6 billion people that aren't vaccinated, or 6.9 billion people. And that we need to make sure that we're getting the vaccines everywhere around the world, that everybody needs to get it, just to be human beings. And a lot of other stuff. And then let me move on from that American Rescue Plan. Now we're into part 2, which at the moment, President Biden's broken into 2 pieces. The first part is a $2 trillion American jobs plan. This is 10,000 bridges to be fixed, 220,000 miles of road, modernizing our electrical grid system, fixing the water systems, all lead out of the pipes. There's no more Flint, Michigan, everywhere in America. Transit, it wipes out, actually the American Rescue Plan wiped out all the cuts we were gonna have to do to Metro. It brought another 1.7 billion to Metro, and that'll be incredibly important for all the people that have to rely on it. Expands the electric vehicle market. And really, one of the things we've seen in the pandemic is it's really accentuated the gap between those who have a lot and those who have a little, especially with children, and especially seen through the lens of broadband. You know, my grandkids are fine, right? They got their iPads and they live in Alexandria, but there are a lot of kids down Route 1 corridor where Carrie's Church is and Cameron's, and you know, no internet service, lousy internet service, no computers. So the notion is that every American should have access to affordable, competitive, fast broadband service. And that's part of that. And then the second half, which right now is being called the American Family Plan, is building not the physical infrastructure, but the human infrastructure, fixing the safety net. And that's making this child tax credit permanent, the earned income tax credit expansion permanent, trying to, an enormous amount of money for care workers, which is, you know, as we all get older, and you know, Alzheimer's creeps up and the average age, there's an enormous need for care workers who are among the most underpaid, poorly treated people in America. And then the other half of that is childcare, which, as almost every mother knows, the typical mother's earned income is less than the cost of the childcare. So these are the second, what I'm guessing to be about $2 trillion, is going to be making enormous investments in just, you know, basically the New Deal Part 2 in our human capital. The notion of we can't grow an ever more just and equitable economy if we're just building roads and bridges. That will help, but we really need to invest in the people who've been left behind. And there are many different pieces of that, but that's what's going on. And then we'll have a lot of other good stuff coming up. I've been working on the No Hate Act for about 4 years, which would require all police departments to actually report the hate crimes, which is especially relevant now with this huge increase in Asian American. But even in the last couple of years, the number of hate crimes against African Americans, against Jews, against Muslims have just skyrocketed. And you have something like 20 of the largest cities in America report 0 hate crimes every year. So we need to, and it's the old business notion that if you can't manage what you don't measure. And so we measure it, we have a chance to actually intervene on that. And lots of other really good things. These are exciting times because we have this momentary trifecta. Joe Biden, a 50-50 Senate, and a very slim margin in the House. In fact, because I live so close, I am the most spoiled member of Congress. I've been carrying 10 proxies most of the year. this is the first time they've ever had proxy voting in the US House because of coronavirus. So all these folks from the West Coast that are older that don't want to fly back. So I now consider myself the Joe Manchin of the House. Nancy's not nice to me. I've got all these proxy votes. Anyway, but so it's this can be really fulfilling. But we also know that with this really slim margin, I mean, we lose 4 or 5 House seats. Kevin McCarthy is the Speaker in the next Congress. That we need to do as much as we possibly can while the power is there. And yes, we would love to do as much as we can in a bipartisan way. We'd love to get 10 or more senators in the Senate on Republican senators for these different bills. But as the president has said, and Secretary Buttigieg, when he was here 2 weeks ago, we want them, but we can't wait, which was one of the challenges that Barack Obama had with Obamacare. He spent 2 years trying to get a couple of Republican votes, and ultimately none were there. And we'd have been much better off doing it. But by the way, I don't want to go on a rant, but I so look forward to us eliminating the filibuster, because right now, the U.S. Senate does not look like the American people. The 50 Democratic senators represent 45 million more people than the 50 Republican senators. Our 2 California senators represent 46 million people. The 2 Wyoming senators represent 450,000 people. And as a consequence, the Senate is heavily skewed towards older, whiter, more conservative, more rural, and really don't look anything like the American people. Even the House is not quite the same. We have to win by more than 4% as Democrats to have a majority in the House because of gerrymandering. And that also makes it difficult. But we keep pushing in the right direction. I'm confident that some of my conservative friends, as Bill Buckley once said, are standing in the middle of the highway of history yelling halt. That we're on the right side of history and just have to keep pressing on regardless. Anyway, there's lots of other stuff I could talk to you about, including going to the moon and Mars. I've set up this wonderful small task force, completely bipartisan, on fusion energy, which is not fission, of course, but is the power of the sun, which when we make it real, hopefully in the next 5 years, will transform not just climate change, but poverty. But if you take the scarce resource of energy and make it not scarce, the chances of lifting people out of poverty all over the world become very, very real. And another small working group with Ed Markey, Jeff Merkley, and John Garamendi, the 4 of us trying to do everything we can to move us back into serious arms control negotiations with the Russians and trying to halt what could be trillions and trillions of dollars modernizing our nuclear forces, that we already have enough to kill everybody many times over. We don't need to spend trillions of dollars doing it again. Anyway, I'd love to take your questions or listen to your speeches or anything else that that Joe and Bill wants to do.
Well, we'll keep our speeches to a minimum, hopefully. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the interplay between the federal level and the state and local level, particularly around, VIC originated advocating for people experiencing homelessness. And right now we're looking at a need to build, new shelters and really address homelessness in Fairfax County. I'd be curious to hear you talk about how your bills and legislative priorities affect homelessness in our region and the interplay between, the local level and the federal level on that topic.
Joe, you bring up a really interesting dilemma that I struggle with all the time. I was in the Virginia Senate for 8 years, which I loved. But I was president of the Senate, which means I wasn't a legislator, which I hated because it was much more fun to be, in the room making it rather than just casting tie votes, always on the winning side, by the way. So in states to the laboratories of democracy, they get a lot more done in Richmond. So when you look at a specific program on homelessness, it's much more likely to look to Richmond than to Washington. However, the big source of money is going to come from Washington. And it's really difficult, in the US Congress to devise an anti-homelessness program that works everywhere, is accepted everywhere. So you end up throwing a lot of money at community block development grants, for example, or lots more money to state and to local governments. There's tons that are going to flow through to Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax out of these couple of bills. And then just hoping that the Jeff McKays and Justin Wilsons and folks like that, Matt DeFerrantes, are channeling it to the right NGOs and the right, affordable housing agencies.
Right. Yeah, and one of my questions was kind of a follow-up on the affordable housing issue, and which ties so closely to the homelessness problem, right? But I suppose the answer is similar, that you're a funder, but you really at the federal level don't devise programs as much as it happens at the state and local level.
Yeah. So one of the things I with Susan Del Bene, who's from Seattle, on Ways and Means with me, and she was the lead, and I was one of the couple of co-leads on expanding the LIHTC, which was the housing tax credit, by 50%. And the number of additional housing units that creates over a 10-year period of time is in the millions. But that's what we did, is we said, here's more money for tax credits that the local jurisdictions can pull down to give to Alexandria Housing Development Corporation or whomever, community housing partners. But so we're not, again, it's not programmatic, it's just putting a lot more money on the table for people to build the housing that's needed.
Right. Yeah. I see Allison's hands up. Let's, Allison, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thanks, Joe. And
Yeah.
Hello, Congressman Beyer. I'm Allison DeCourcy with United Community, President and CEO. Thank you for being here today. I was really excited to hear you talk about the New Deal Part 2, specifically the investment in childcare. We know that at United Community that an quality early childhood education is critical to the success of one's future, right? And you may or may not know that due to the pandemic, the location of our early learning center, which can accommodate nearly 100 kiddos, ages 6 weeks to pre-K, was closed because Fairfax County schools were closed. When given the opportunity to reopen, we tried it, and actually parents were a little bit nervous about having kiddos out of sight. So that experiment was ceased, and we're going to reopen on July 1st. And it's going to be a real test for us because we don't know what the market is for early childhood right now. Yet we are sitting in a childcare desert. Your district, if you look at the data, we are in a childcare desert. One of the census tracts in your district shows that less than 2% of kiddos are enrolled in early childhood education. So I'm wondering if you have any and let me say one other thing. Our goal at United Community is not to fill those 96 slots for kiddos in our early learning center located at Bryant Alternative High School. It's to address this childcare desert. So beyond what we can accommodate, but really look to the holistic problem. So I'm wondering if you can share any information either now or perhaps with a staffer down the road about what the New Deal Part 2, that investment in childcare, is going to be looking like, because I couldn't agree more that we need to value those educators and put money in the future of our country, which is our youth.
Yeah, Allison, among the things, let me ask my pal Julia to do, is to send our Joint Economic Committee reports on childcare over to Joe or Bill or whoever's managing this stuff, so to share with you. We've done a lot of deep dives on it in the last year because it was the COVID-19 just destroyed an already very weak system. And that's even before the coronavirus crisis, there was an enormous feeling on the Democratic side, House and Senate, that we need to invest much, much more in early childhood education. You'll remember that when Tim Kaine ran for governor in 2005, his central piece of his platform was universal pre-K for 4-year-olds, which everyone agrees is a good thing. He only got some of it done, resistance from the legislature. And we're always fighting back against some of our Republican friends who believe that government shouldn't be taking over from families, from mothers. And yet we know that, in fact, one of my favorite statistics is that our children, coming from comfortable homes with educated parents, are going to hear 30 million more words by age 5 than children that are living in poverty that you're probably serving at UCM or United Community. So yeah, but once again, and we don't have many of the details on the second half of the plan, except that it's likely to be another $2 trillion, and it's to be very much focused on human infrastructure. But I can also say with great confidence, it's mostly going to be about money, money that's specifically channeled to support early childhood education, and an enormous emphasis on the staff, because as you know, typically those folks that are working with early children often are 6 in the morning until 6 or 7 at night. They're surrounded by sick kids all the time. And they tend to be way underpaid. And yet, aside from a nonprofit like United Community, the private ones are dramatically expensive. So there's just a lot more we have to wrap our arms around, that this is a public good and needs to be paid for with public money to make it affordable for every American.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
By the way, the long-term payoff is so large, it's breathtaking.
Enormous. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to go to one of the questions from the chats on the vaccine rollout. So much of the registration for vaccine rollout is relying on transportation and access to the internet. Several faith communities on this call and throughout the county are trying to get vaccine clinics on site to reach low-income homeless populations or other disproportionately impact populations, right? These populations attend their services, and we'd like to get them vaccinated while they're present there. Do you have suggestions on how to make sure that low-income marginal communities are being prioritized in the vaccine effort? And how can we perhaps work with your office to make the vaccine more accessible in our region here?
Well, our office would have a brokering impact, which we'd be happy to do, because I know I've been on the Arlington. Arlington has its own vaccines task force that stood up. And specifically, I've been on a bunch of their meetings. The priority has been, how do you get it to the people that are underserved? The older folks living alone, that the ones that you serve with Meals on Wheels and they never get out, and no transportation, or people in the poverty pockets. And I know every one of the jurisdictions has the same kind of commitment. So where there's an opportunity, we'll connect you, and that's exactly what Julia's good at.
Great. And then a related question.
One of the things that Julia and Noah Simon did recently is one of the big churches in Gum Springs, Pastor Miles. They just set up a vaccination site there in the church, the big African-American church there.
Bethlehem
They do
Baptist.
as many people as possible. So, yeah.
Right, at Bethlehem Baptist, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
And then a related topic, there's a lot of talk and worry about mental wellness of people, particularly those significantly affected by COVID-19, isolations, loss of job, homelessness, discrimination, et cetera. How's this issue being attended to at the local, state, and national level? And again, it's always that interplay, right?
Yeah, and everyone's worried about it and concerned about it. I don't have a specific number of how much. There was a mental health block, in the billions of dollars in the American Rescue Plan, recognizing that both anxiety and depression are among the highest ever measured in America. And we hear it all the time from the school counselors and the college counselors. and part of it's just pace of change, and then you throw COVID on top of it, and throw the divisions in our society on top of that. And I'm positive, once again, I don't know a dollar amount, but in the American Family Plan, part 2 of the next Biden iteration, there will be a huge component in it. There's a whole set of mental health bills circulating right now, being led by David Trone, who represents sort of Western Maryland, and has a lot of family experience with it. So yes, and again, one of the challenges, because mental health affects every one of our families, in dramatic ways, is that it's so much easier to get money to treat cancer or a broken leg than it is to treat the mental health issues that are necessary.
Right.
The mental health is, because it's often existential, it's often long-term. You can't take a pill.
Mm-hmm. I see some folks' hands up. Mary Payton, I think you were up first. You have a question for the Congressman Beyer?
I do. Hi, Dan. Good to see
Hey,
you.
Mary.
I want to follow up on. Hey, I want to follow up on Joe's first question about funding for affordable housing, homelessness, workforce housing, that whole spectrum. And I agree. All we need from you is money. Got a lot of ideas. And the county hasn't been very good about funding. It cut its funding in half 11 years ago, and it doesn't put that money back, or even the additional money it's promised. But they do have a lot of ideas. And I'm just wondering about what kind and how much of money we might expect. I'm expecting a big check from the feds. I know the American Rescue Plan, we get what, 200.
Mary, you're breaking up.
2 million for state for use. That's not coming through other money coming through. Could you give us an idea through these different legislations, what kind of money applicable to affordable housing might be coming?
Mary, I can't do it off the top of my head.
You can send me an email.
Yeah, but we can research it for you. The one number I do know off the top of my head was the 50% increase in the affordable housing tax credit, but that actually came at the end of the year. That was before. So
yeah, thank you for that.
I love the APA, the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing number, is that all we have to do is, and I may have the numbers backwards, is double the number of housing vouchers and triple the tax credits, or double the tax credits and triple the housing vouchers, and everything will be fine. So, so this is the direction we have to go. And then, by the way,
well, I know we're getting more vouchers.
Yeah,
we're getting more vouchers from HUD. I know that, and we've also, as you know, the state has declared that a source of income is a protected category. So landlords will now have to accept those vouchers, which they didn't before always.
Yeah.
So we're happy about that.
But some years ago, somebody told me that the solution to homelessness is housing. And it may not be the total solution, but it's a big part of it.
Big part. Yeah.
Right, it is.
Carrie, I see your hand as well. Do you have a question?
Sure. Thanks. I'm going to take the conversation in a slightly different direction. As a pastor, one of the things that I'm obviously most concerned about is the gospel, and a big part of that is loving your neighbor. And I know that that's what all of us here are about, and about whether we're nonprofit, representing nonprofits or churches, or even those of us that are in government service. It's to help our brothers and sisters in the community. But a big part of loving your neighbor also means we have to know the truth about our neighbors. We have to know reality. And we're living in a time right now where there are so many different truths that are out there. People are living in different realities. many of the people that stormed the Capitol on January 6th honestly believed that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. And so I'm really concerned about what can we do to help, I'm not sure how to word this, but just help make sure that that news media is telling the truth. Yes, we can have opinions, but it seems like the truth in many, many places is getting lost. And I wonder if you have any thoughts and how do we deal with this issue today?
Oh, Carrie, let me give you 5 ideas, and then the 6th one is, I don't know. Robert Putnam
ask those kind of questions where I don't have the answer either.
Yeah, Robert Putnam has a book called Upswing. He famously wrote America Bowls Alone, a generation ago, Harvard professor. And he tracks, it's got a wonderful cover that looks like a bell-shaped curve or a mountain. And he argues in virtually every respect, income inequality, wealth inequality, social distancing, divisions between people, we're at the kind of nadir that we were at 100 years ago. In fact, one of his more creative things is he said, when there's a lot of social cohesion, and it peaked in the mid-1950s, everybody's named like Bill or John or Bob or Robert. And it starts to fall apart. People get ever weirder names because we become more individualized and less social cohesion. That's certainly what you see. And there are very few Bills or Bobs or Johns anymore for that reason.
Or Dons.
Yeah, exactly. So if you meet somebody named Stephen, you can pretty much bet they were born in the 1950s, for example. So among the ideas, number one, I was on a very cool panel last night with a friend of mine in Kansas City called the American Public Square Movement, which is trying to bring together men and women to have polite, structured, but honest conversations about difficult issues. Last night's conversation was about forgiving college debt, which is a complicated issue. Not so much for the very poor, but do you want to take that wealthy kid who's 3rd generation Harvard and just forgive his college debt when he's going to make $2 million more than any of the rest of us the rest of his life? But also, on guns and abortion and immigration and all these other things. And so Julia's boss is trying to figure out how do we set this up in Northern Virginia to get people across the political spectrum talk to each other. I think I proudly voted for the PRO Act, which is the most pro-union legislation we've had in 2 generations a couple of weeks ago. Because one of the things that's happened was back when America was 30% unionized rather than 6%, you had people talking to those blue collar workers, the non-college educated, and keeping them politically active and interested. And right now, they're getting all of it from Fox News rather than, and so the more we can move in that direction, the better off we are. Civics education has disappeared. I'm all for STEM education, but boy, it is really tough to find a high school or a college. They're closing history departments at colleges across the country because nobody wants to, so a pushback there would be really important. And I think the single biggest thing, and I don't have a societal solution, it's the personal, is that we continue on your theory that we must love each other, that you treat everybody with respect and listen. And I try to have as many Republican friends as I possibly can in the House, even though I'm still mad at them for voting against Pennsylvania and not voting for impeachment. But for example, I chair the space subcommittee. Brian Babbins, a conservative dentist from Johnson Spaceport in Texas. And we don't agree on much, but we're working together and we're friends and we're going to do space as best we can and just try to build the relationships as best we can. But I don't think there's a short answer or an easy answer other than a commitment to goodwill And
Thank you. Building relationships, I think.
Yeah.
We need to do that.
and not demonizing people.
Right.
Even though it's so easy to demonize Ted Cruz, but you really don't want to demonize anybody. So.
And it's easy to fall into.
There's a new book out that I heard about that, and I don't know who the author is, but it goes back to how did we get into this situation, political situation that we're in now, and they say it started back in the 80s when Newt Gingrich really started this process of really kind of demonizing the other side, and it's kind of all built up from that, and that's why we're in the situation we're in today.
I mean, at least 4 pieces of it are: number one, getting rid of what was the doctrine, equal access, both sides now, that the FCC got rid of, and that gave us Rush Limbaugh. And
Right.
then we had Newt, and then we had Roger Ailes putting together Fox News. And you subtract Fox News from the equation, you have a very different country right away. And the explosion of media channels. So we're not all getting it from Peter Jennings and Walter Cronkite. We don't have one canon now. We have myriad sources. It's just it's a complicated world.
You know, and you mentioned, or both of you mentioned the importance of relationships, and one of the challenges is developing relationships outside of people who already think like you, right? Right. So how do you reach across and get to know? You know, you talked about the past unionized workforce and the voice of working folks when unions had a greater representation, and I think there was more interaction, or maybe I just have rosy glasses on the past.
Yeah, I think there was,
Yeah.
but it requires an intentionality. It's
Right.
just like if we're not careful, every dinner party only has white people at it that graduated from college.
Yeah.
And so we have to make a real effort. You know, for example, on systemic racism, you're not going to overcome it accidentally. We're going to have to really work hard to make sure that we are putting people in positions of power and relationships with us that reflect a different reality.
Unless anybody has a follow-up on this, I've got a question on a different topic from the a chat, and so this I'm interested in how you think about this. The comment is much of the planned activities are really exciting. Talking about the bills through Congress. However, they raise a question of how we pay for all of this good stuff. The current price tag at $2 to $3 trillion is substantially beyond what we've thought about, I think, in this country in the past that we could do. And yet we hear less about how it'll be paid for. So I'm wondering how you think about that, and maybe what an upper level might be that would be considered by Congress as too much. And I say that as a strong supporter of these programs, right? But just how you weigh that.
Well, Joe, I'd have to say the very first thing is, as a career businessman and economics major and all that, I think about it a lot differently now than I did 30 years ago. I was Paul Simon's presidential campaign chair in Virginia, 1987-88. and if the campaign had been on radio, he'd have been our nominee. A wonderful guy. But the reason I was attracted to him, despite the fact that he'd written more books than Ronald Reagan had read, was that he had promised to balance the federal budget in his first 4 years. Right now, I could care less. Because we've discovered over the years that a bunch of different things. Number one, the so-called Phillips curve, which some of you may remember, which says, the faster, the lower the unemployment, the greater the danger of inflation. It just hadn't happened the last 15 years. In fact, we've been fighting disinflation in America and worldwide, which is a much greater danger than inflation. And even with all the money that we've poured into the economy in the last year with COVID, very little pressure, some housing pressure, but that's about it. And as Jay Powell, who's Republican and chair of Federal Reserve, says he just doesn't, he and Janet Yellen both don't see any real inflationary pressure. And if there is, they have the tools to deal with it. There's an amazing book by a woman named Stephanie Kelton, Kelten, on modern monetary theory, which I don't completely, and she basically makes the point, look, we're the strongest economy in the world. Our currency is the base currency. We can do whatever we want. And if she's only half right, there's a lot less pressure. So two more interesting factoids. The billionaires in America last year, just the billionaires, their net worth increased by $1.9 trillion. So that was enough to pay for the American Rescue Plan without a single one losing a penny from where they were at the beginning of the year. Or the top 5%, their net worth increased by $4 trillion, which is enough to pay for all this stuff. So Biden so the American Rescue Plan not paid for. This next one will be. We'll increase the corporate income tax rate probably to 28%. We'll increase the top marginal rate from 37 back to the 39.6 where it was before. There'll probably be some attempt to go after capital gains. We still have, you probably saw that American corporations last year paid an average tax rate of 7.8%. And 95 of the top 200 paid zero. So there's a lot of money there. There's a great editorial in the New York Times 3 weeks ago about Charles Rosati, who's a fellow in Northern Virginia, who points out that our personal income, our W-2 income, our 1099 income, almost all of that is captured by the IRS, so we pay taxes on it. Business income, less than half of it ever gets reported to the IRS. It's the equivalent to $6.5 trillion a year. I don't trust my number. It's a huge, huge number. If businesses just paid the taxes that are due, no increase, just that they're honestly reported. So we will go after all that and just try to make sure. We don't want to raise taxes on anybody struggling to get by. Joe Biden actually says $400,000, less than $400,000 income per year, which is a pretty high number. No increase in taxes. But there's so much money above that that can pay for all of this. I'm on the tax subcommittee, and it's really fun, by the way.
Great.
And we've even gotten to something like a step up in basis. Right now we have a $22 million exemption from the capital gains tax. So, that 0.3% is going to pay any capital gains tax. It's almost nothing. You could cut it back to the 11 million that it was before, generate a lot of money, and no one's going to miss a meal or a country club payment.
You mentioned earlier the importance of civics education, and we have a question in the chat whether you can recommend an organization in our area that is promoting civic education statewide or nationally.
I don't off the top of my head. Although my wife's on the board of the Virginia Humanities, and that's very much their mission.
Right.
And in fact, it's been really interesting, because Virginia's racial history, massive resistance, both capitals of the Confederacy, the Army of Northern Virginia versus the Army of Potomac, et cetera. She's really been pushing them to use their humanities grants to do a lot more education on race in Virginia for all of us. It's really interesting. Years ago, I was on the Virginia Israel Commission, Jerry Bilal's appointee, and I got on the education committee. So we were doing a Holocaust education. And what was remarkable was very few high schools in Virginia taught anything about the Holocaust. And in the late 80s, when we started rolling it out, what you found was kids saying, that can't possibly be true. It can't possibly be true.
Huh. Wow.
There's lots more. I'm not a fan of standardized testing, SOLs, teaching to the test. It's just a terrible thing. On the other hand, I think it really is important to spend as much time with children stimulating their interest in the world around them, including the history.
You spoke of Virginia's particular problems, and one of the questions here around racism, right, and our history. One of the questions is, as a focus on how systemic racism has been embedded in public policy is becoming more focused, what public policies in Virginia do you see being retrenched, re-examined, and recalibrated using a lens of equity?
Well, incarceration, number one. We've seen it with the change in Commonwealth attorneys in the last couple of years in Arlington and in Fairfax, and even change in attitude maybe in Alexandria. But I think it will show up in lots of different ways. I'm really thrilled with the Virginia moving forward on its voter registration, moving to, no fault absentee, longer periods of time. My daughter's now signed up to get a permanent absentee ballot, which Virginia's put in place. I'm hoping we'll move to ranked choice voting. All these things will really help overcome some of that systemic racism. Remember, my grandmother used to take the farm hands that worked on her farm in McLean in the 1940s and 50s. She'd have to go with them with their 3 poll tax receipts when they did the literacy test out of the King James Bible in order for them to be able to vote. Because the Bird machine was built on 10% voter participation, white men that own property. And we have a different Virginia now. We just have to keep pushing forward. By the way, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in Capitol Hill, including Mark Warner, a book that you probably read, especially all you guys who are into housing, is Richard Rothstein's The Color of Law. Is how do you overcome that? And Mark Warner and a famous economist named Mark Zandi have been working on a really interesting federal proposal to allow first-generation home buyers to do so with no fees, with 1% interest rates, and a bunch of things that make it much more possible for people to buy that first home. And when you look at so many of us, our sources of our personal wealth is either what we inherited or the appreciation value of our home.
Yeah, the Color of Law was for an eye-opening, eye-opening book and compilation.
You probably saw stuff in the New York Times in the last couple of days about heirs' interest, the way they've been taking away, 98% of farms owned by African-American families 50 years ago are now no longer because of the title problems that came after the Civil War. And so they were just, taxes weren't paid, they were put up for auction, they were taken away from families that had them for generations. The fun part about my job is there's never an end to the things that we need to be working on.
Right. I know your time is tight this morning with the follow-up event. I've got more questions in the chat, but I wonder if anyone else has any questions they'd like to ask directly as we get close to wrapping up. Or if there's anything we should have asked Congressman Beyer that you'd like to relate to it.
When we're putting women on the moon.
Yeah.
But 2025, 2026, and then men and women on Mars in 2033, which will be fun. And it is one of the few things that is very bipartisan, that everybody gets excited about. So.
I see Diane Watson's hands up. Diane?
Yes, thank you. Going back to an issue that you talked about in the very beginning and talking about the direct care workers, those that are taking care of our older population in the nursing homes and such. I know that wages has been an issue. Do you think increasing the education and the certification would help to allow the wages to be increased? And there's been talk about trying to get a mandate on the staff and patient ratio so that one aide doesn't have, a multiple number of people to take care of, lowering that ratio so that the quality of care could be better. Have you heard anything about this? Are you proposing anything about this? What can you say about it?
Diane, I personally am not. I've heard about the ratios, but I don't know enough to tell you what they should be or what the progress is on that. And similarly on raising the standards, generally we're always for that, but we always have to be careful that the raising the standards isn't equivalent to locking people out of jobs. You know, that the whole notion of we want to expand access. The big thing is just pushing salaries way up. You know, the amazing part is care workers is one of the few jobs that you can't automate. You can't have a machine do it. And yet it tends to be so underpaid, and it's arguably among the most valuable of the jobs out there in terms of its impact on human beings.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
I think
I agree you can't automate it, but because the care is so intense for those fragile people, there really needs to be, make sure that the people who are doing it have the right amount of education to know that they're doing it properly. So that's one remark that I wanted to make. And then also talking about the child care, we know that the child care expenses are so much, and a lot of times the emphasis is on, you know, those who are have lower wages or, you know, negligible wages, but the middle class, there's an awful lot of the middle class that the amount that they pay is just astronomical. It's like the working poor is what I've heard. And I know of an instance where 2 children going into a daycare setting can be $825. You know, the average person that just takes an awful lot from their paychecks. They might say that the paychecks looks very large, but when you start to multiply weeks for that amount, it doesn't leave them a lot for anything else. I hope I could express this correctly. You know.
You've done it very well, Diane, and not a new story. And I don't think we're anywhere close, but if I were writing my perfect world, we'd have federally funded and managed daycare centers across the country. And not, you know, you don't have to put your child in it, but they're all available so that no one is trapped otherwise. And you have to do it on a very sophisticated high level so that they're not just babysitting. They're actually doing child development too.
Thank you, Congressman Beyer.
Congressman Beyer, as we close out, I wonder if you have any thoughts on how an organization like VIC can support you and support kind of the initiatives we've talked about, and any suggestions you have for us.
Well, you guys are already incredibly well informed. I would continue reading the stories in the New York Times and the Washington Post so that you understand as best you can what are in these bills and can support them. But then, you know, the harder work I think you all do every day is trying to heal our society, heal our community. You know, working, you know, sometimes with the least advantaged, and sometimes with people that have plenty of material success but closed minds. Any way that we can bring people along. It's my theme for the year, personal theme is from Voltaire, who said, all we can do is cultivate our own garden. And so I'm just focused on cultivating my own garden as best I very can. And
Well, on behalf of the group here on VIC, we'd like to thank you for the time you spent with us today. We truly appreciate it, and thank you for the work that you're doing. And we know you have to run, but thanks so much.
yeah, I'll say hi to the First Lady for you.
Appreciate it.
From a distance, right?
Right.
Thank you. And please
Thank
invite
you.
me back. And Julia will follow up on a couple of things that we talked about, like the child care report. And please
Okay.
reach out to her on specific places where you think we should be coordinating vaccine sites to help the people that use her.
Please do. I will leave my email in the chat box.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julia.
Have
Thank
a
you,
good
Congressman
spring.
Beyer.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, I feel like we covered a lot. I think that was a good discussion. take a breath, right? So as we kind of shifted our agenda, order, usually we do announcements and introductions first, but as Bill said, we kind of, rather than doing introductions, had people update their name in the chat. I was thinking that it might make sense for us to talk a little bit about an issue that we've been discussing on the steering committee around the new shelter at the PennDAW site, and our work and our concerns about the shelter to replace the Kennedy Center. Bill, I don't know if you have thoughts or other ideas of what we should cover now.
No, that's really, I think, the one that is most salient at the moment. And I'm sorry we don't have Pam here today. I think she had an accident of some kind that involved her foot or something like, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we don't have her, but Mary certainly is definitely in the loop on talking with different people in different parts of the community about what's going on. In VIC, we are developing a portion. We're going to develop a portion of the Ventures in Community website to give factual and supportive information about the replacement for the Kennedy Shelter on Beacon Hill Road at the site of the former Hybla Valley Nursery, and we did write the co-facilitators on behalf of the steering committee wrote a supportive letter to Dan Stork about this, and we should actually probably, the statement is going to go up on the website, but I will circulate the letter to Christina to send out to the to the mailing list so that everybody in VIC gets it. But
Bill, along with that, it would be very helpful if the church is represented here and the nonprofits that are able to do that, if they could all write a letter of support for the new shelter up at Beacon Hill, because it's the opposition is getting very well organized, and we need to make sure that we're as organized, if not more, and that we get letters to our supervisor and make that happen.
Right.
And also the nature of the opposition, it's really framed around, we don't want it at this site.
And so just
because it's too near residences, but there isn't a place that I know of that isn't near residences that's available. Go ahead, Joe.
So just to make sure everyone's at the same starting point, right? The county issued a bond referendum years ago. There was approval in funding through that referendum, the building of a new shelter to replace the Kennedy Shelter. A site has been selected and purchased by the county. It's at Beacon Hill. The plans are to co-locate that shelter with a fire station, some supportive housing, and potentially affordable housing. Supervisor Stork has put together a committee to examine the issues and discuss the issues around that, and several VIC members are part of that working committee. But as we've talked about, there is growing a growing group of people opposed to the shelter, as Bill said, based on the location. Mary, you've done a lot of work putting together factual information that will be moving on to the website, just so that we can share that information with each other. And I just want to echo what Carrie said. Each of our organizations and each of our churches sending a letter in addition to Vic's letter. It's important that the pro voices also be heard. So Mary, maybe you can add to the.
Yeah, we're going to ask on the website that people send in their statements, and you can send it to Dan Stork, but we would also appreciate if you sent a copy to us that we could put on the website. And we'd especially like to have a lot of statements from the local churches and also various nonprofits that belong to VIC. And We're also trying to get some turnout. There's going to be a county meeting, which is the first countywide informational meetings, will be held April 24th and 26th. The 24th is a Saturday morning and the 26th is a Monday evening. And we feel it's important, and this may not all be through VIC. I'm also representing the South County Task Force on the Housing Shelter Committee. And we want to get, it's a Zoom meeting, both are Zoom meetings, and we really want to get a good turnout of people who are supportive of the shelter. We know the opponents are going to turn out, and we think it's important that this meeting may not make it look like every person in the community is opposed to the shelter, because many people I've talked to are not opposed to it. So we're going to be contacting people, and we're going to be forming a little group of people to contact more people. So if anyone's interested in that, please email me. We'll have a couple Zoom meetings next week, and I'll be sending out information, and we'll be looking at a strategy to contact people in the neighborhood.
Great, thank you.
Post those dates again, please.
April 24th, Saturday morning, and April 26th, Monday night at 7. And I can send out the dates and some of the material from the website, which is being produced now, in an email to everyone.
Yeah.
Through Christina.
Can I ask, is there a sign-on letter that VIC has produced?
On the website, we just have a very brief statement that we're asking people to sign on to. And we could, I guess I could put that out through the email.
We've written.
We have the VIC
letter.
statement. We could put that out and ask people to sign on to it.
Yeah,
You
I'm just
wanna do
wondering about,
that?
the Alliance for Human Services is an organization like the South County Task Force that can sign on to show support. So I'm just
Okay.
wondering about the best way to do that. If we write our own letter, or if there's an easy way to do that, just to sign on.
Right.
My suggestion is to do both. To sign in support of the VIC statement if you wish, but also to do one as your own organization. If you feel that you can do that, then that's great.
So Bill, are you thinking we could take the letter that Vic wrote and sent to Supervisor Stork and add additional signatures to that potentially?
It's just, the way Mary had it formatted, it simply says, it gives a choice for somebody to say, I or my organization wishes to sign on and support. Am I correct, Mary?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said. I got a
That
wave.
Yeah, so my understanding was that as you were formulating the pages and the support page, that you have it set so that the VIC statement can go up, and then if people or organizations wish to, they can click on something to say, I wish to sign on in support of this statement. Is that correct? Am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah, we had two things you could click. One is I support, it could be either this that we should have the shelter where the county put it. And the other one is send me more information, so that we could send out, we could get a email list of people who were interested in either getting more information or supporting it.
I think Lisa's suggestion was that we craft a letter that could be structured for organizations to add their signature to, as opposed to clicking support on a website.
Yeah.
And we can take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Steering committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what they would do on the website is they would sign their name, their organization, their information, their contact information, and then we would produce a letter much like the one Michelle Crocker produced on the housing issues for the budget hearings at the Board of Supervisors, that just lists those organizations that have signed on.
Okay.
You don't actually have to write a signature. You can do it electronically.
Ann, I see you're speaking, but you're on mute. Ann? You're still muted. Sorry.
I was just wondering, is there any regulatory organization or agency that has commented on the condition of the old shelter that we could use as ammunition?
Yeah, we should get that condemned and then they'd have to move it quickly. I don't know if they've had the inspectors out there. I don't know.
Something like that, that would kind of, bolster our position a little bit.
Well, even the opponents admit that the Kennedy shelter is deplorable.
Right.
The kind of leader of the civic association opposition has been there and she has nothing good to say about it. So she agrees that a new shelter is needed. And she is saying that to the other people who may not have been there. So I guess that's not in dispute that we should keep people there forever, which is good. But they, of course, want it in a different neighborhood. Of course, then the neighbors from the different neighborhood will probably show up and say, why is it in my neighborhood? There's neighborhoods everywhere in Mount Vernon. And
who's the woman that you referenced?
She's the co-chair of the Mount Vernon Council of Civic Associations, Catherine Ward.
Well, Anne, if I could just add to that, it's a 100-year-old water plant. That's where the shelter is now, and I think everyone recognizes that it's really not salvageable. It's really in a bad shape. And I think even the Mount Vernon Citizens Association, MVCCA, feels the same. They're just really objecting to where the replacement shelter would go. I mean, more than anything. But I do think that just from the last task force meeting, I think there were a lot of questions in the chat, really around the operations, the admissions to the shelter, who gets in there. Also just, and certainly on the site, on the selection of the site. But I think there are a lot of questions in the chat that really only the county can answer. It's really not Pam who's going to be operating the shelter, but it's more the county.
Right.
And I think we have to get from the county someone, frankly, to really answer those questions, to really address them, because that's really what they were asking about. And I brought this up with Christine, who's in Dan Stork's office, that we really need someone from the county to really address those specific concerns, talk about the operations, talk about the rules and regulations in the shelter itself. And I think that would help to, well, to certainly assuage some of their concerns among the residents.
Yeah, and certainly it's the county's
We're
place
also
to do that, not ours.
looking at trying to get some.
Mary dropped off.
Mary, you froze.
Listen again.
Yeah.
We're also, asking the county that's
Not hearing you, Mary.
Yeah, Mary, you're not coming through.
people to
I think the county's challenge is that it needs to be willing to say, we understand your concern, but it's not an issue because, and then to answer with the facts.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the things that are being raised are are in fact things that will be resolved by the shelters existing, not exacerbated by the shelters existing. And the county has to be willing to just put it out there and to be very clear, and to accept that if somebody doesn't like the answer, there's nothing the county can do about it, but they need to give the answer.
Right. No, I agree with that, Bill. I do. I think that's actually the right approach. They just have to answer the questions and live with it. I mean, it's you know, the best they can do is just answer the questions.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think somebody from this school board also should be asked to make a statement about whether or not children are allowed or students are allowed to walk and walk up to Route 1 and cross Route 1, because I know in my church, you know, emails have circulated saying that that's a big problem. And I don't know whether it is or not. I mean, I would assume that children are not allowed to do that. But.
Mary, I see you've done
I'm
what I
back.
have to do at home, which is move to different places
Yeah.
around my house with my phone to try to get good reception. So
That's right. I just wanted to say two things. There are two things that the people in Spring Bank neighborhood have said they want. And one is, I think they should have both of them. One is they want the woods cleaned up. And we're working with Pam and I, we're trying to get the county to send some of the homeless people that they pay $10 an hour to clean up streams up to Quandra Brook. So they actually be getting the mess cleaned up by homeless people who are being paid for it. And the other one is they want, as David recommended some time ago, the old fire station site. They really want that. They've expressed a real desire for that site as a community center or whatever. And the county, I've not heard anything else they want to do with it. And I think we should side with them in getting that very tiny site given to them and getting a community center there.
Sounds like a good idea to me. Anything that provides a center of activity for a neighborhood and a community is
right.
Going to be.
Speaking from some experience here, it ain't easy getting a community center, you know, even with an existing property, not even building from retrofitting or building from scratch. That is a hard commitment to gain from the county.
Yeah.
Not saying that it shouldn't be pursued, but it's tough.
We should be realistic.
Well, they might be able to use the old building for a while until they design a new one. It's really not much. You know, there's a few offices and classrooms, and then there's just these huge fire bays that could be, you know, kind of temporarily partitioned in different ways, or I don't know. Yeah, I know it's hard. It takes a long time to get anything.
Yeah, I mean, that does take a long time, and they may have to do a bond issue to raise the money to go build it. But it would be it's almost like a, you know, kind of a peace offering to the residents that you're sort of giving them something out of the whole process that will help them and be a great benefit to them. And be very good.
I think even if it took time, they would be very interested. They would be very happy participating in the planning of it.
Well, that too. Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's like what's going on with the Lee District Community Center, which is the process is very good. It's going to involve the local residents, which would be in Colchester Town, Creekside, the Audubon Trailer Park. They're going to have their say over what is in that building. In fact, what it's going to look like down to the design of it. And Supervisor Lusk is also interested in providing job opportunities to the people in the neighborhood to actually build the building. So to learn building trades and to do apprenticeship programs in the building of the building itself and the redevelopment of the building as a community center. I mean, these are just tremendous opportunities that are that are now there for that community. And these are very much underserved and under-resourced communities that have never seen anything like this. So I think if we could do the same with the old fire station, behind neighborhood health, I think that would just be a huge benefit to everyone there.
This is a very interesting community. It's an old free Black community. Springbank was like Gum Springs, one of the original free Black communities. It was the Quander family, which was a big family out of Mount Vernon Estate. And most of them have moved on now, but the community around there is, pretty much working class, older homes, not impoverished, but feeling like they have a neighborhood, have a community, and they've worked on a lot of improvement projects, but they've always felt like they were fighting hard with the county every step of the way, and that they don't get the attention they deserve in terms of amenities. And there's a lot of development that's going to go on there through Embark, not in their neighborhood, but right next to their neighborhood, and it's already started. So I think having some special attention that would shore up that neighborhood would really be appropriate in any situation.
Can I make an announcement about something unrelated?
Yes, sir.
Nonprofits are having a hard time raising money with events like galas and all that right now because of COVID, obviously. We are at Rising Hope going to have a golf tournament. Hopefully the outdoors will help bring some folks in. May 24th, down at Laurel Hill. And I will make sure that a notice about the golf tournament gets sent to Christina so she can send it out to everybody. But we're excited about this, and we would like to see folks out there and play around with us. So I'll get the information out to you. Thanks.
I look forward to doing anything that's not on a Zoom call, right? We can do in person, outside, inside, anything. Thank you. Jean, I see you have your hand up.
I do, thank you. And Pastor Carey, your last newsletter was very informative and very moving. So that was a good source of some fundraising. Back to an earlier comment or question that someone posted about transportation to the vaccinations. You all know that Shepherd Centers of South County provides the free transportation, right? So if anyone is needing transportation, they have to be over 50 years old, unable to drive, okay, and live west of Route 1. Because east of Route 1, Mount Vernon at Home usually takes care of those folks. But I'm going to put the phone number in the chat box. Please call us. We're especially doing what we can. We haven't missed a single request for a vaccination appointment. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. We've got just a couple minutes left. Anybody else with an announcement?
I was just going to mention that I think it would be good if there were, several experts we could put together that would be able to make a presentation to a church congregation or a community group or somebody about the shelter, something that would be objective, that would help people to understand what's going on.
There is a video of the meeting that was co-hosted by the South County Task Force and VIC. Was it last month? Remind me. That is available on the South County Task Force YouTube channel and also on the VIC YouTube channel. So anybody who, so one thing you can do is anybody who has an interest in factual information can look at that. And it even has two people who've experienced homelessness talking about their experience, as well as a video and description of the Kennedy shelter. So that's well worth the effort to look at. Well, it looks like we're nearing that time. So I will post the recording of this session up on the Ventures in Community YouTube channel once I get it all properly uploaded and so on and so forth. And we'll see you next month. I'm going to be careful about what I say about next month at the moment, because I have to talk to my working group on this panel. It's supposed to be a panel on why we advocate and seek justice and equity for those in need. I'm going to talk with that group early next week, and then we may have an agenda item on the steering committee. The steering committee meets on Wednesday of next week. So those of you who are on the steering committee, you should have received already my email with the link and everything else. But so we'll have more content.
Great. Thank you.
I have one announcement, one more thing.
Okay, Mary.
I want to really encourage everyone to sign up and testify or send written testimony to the Board of Supervisor budget hearings. I can send out a link for that. You don't have to, you can send a video, you can call in, or you can just write testimony. And we really could use some more money for affordable housing and whatever your issue is. But now is the time to speak up, and you need to sign up pretty soon. The public hearings are April 12, 13, and 14. So you should be signing up now.
Thank you.
Very good.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thanks, Joe,
Thanks, everybody.
for participating. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And, again, thanks to Congressman Beyer. So we'll see you next month.